geeks and geekettes. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, mon ami, mi amigos, mein Freunde, mushi mushi, wie geht's? Welcome to another, hopefully fantastic episode of Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me questions about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. Let's not waste another second of your precious time. Let's get to the first question from Billy Bob Joe Ray Cyrus. He's everybody's cousin. Who, in your opinion, is the best novelist who also wrote for comics? Mickey Spillane. Simple answer. You got a lot of wannabe comic book writers who are novelists, and they dip in and the publishers welcome them because they're best-selling novelists. Most of them don't know how to write comics. Mickey Spillane says he wrote a bunch of Submariner comics in the Golden Age. And if you ever read any Submariner comics in the Golden Age, they kick ass. They're really good stories, which is rare in a Golden Age story. So if Mickey wrote any of them, hats off to Mickey. I know you mean who's the best novelist who ever wrote a comic. Mickey's the only one I've ever read who wrote a comic. And Stan Lee just was to his deathbed vociferously denied that Mickey Spillane wrote Submariner comics. I'm going with Mickey because Mickey said he wrote comics in the 50s. You know, he confessed to being a comic book writer in the 50s when being a comic book writer was the lowest of the low. To tell you how low it was, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, when they moved into the suburbs, they told their kids, if anybody asks what we do for a living and why we're home all day, tell them we're bookies. Because being a bookie, which is illegal in the United States, for those of you listening in the UK, being a bookie was more highly regarded than working in comic books. So Mickey, all the way. David Jordan, when you go back and read Silver and Bronze Age comics, especially superhero ones, do you feel like me? You find yourself going into the habit of skipping or just skimming over the captions and thought bubbles and even parts of the dialogue? Stuff was so overwritten back then and filled with redundant information. Yeah, I'm currently rereading Jack Kirby's Demon Run, which I absolutely love. I'm reminded by reading it why I loved it so much when it first came out, how cool it is. But Jack, like a lot of the writers at the time, you know, little too verbose. This was what was happening in the 70s. And I know a lot of people put down Jack Kirby's writing, but Demon has some of his best writing. It's like really, really super purple prose, and you can see like there's an energy to it. He's just like spewing ideas onto the page. And it also reveals that Kirby was a lot better read than we know, because he's making all kinds of arcane references, to medieval sorcery, and they're all accurate. I mean, he's not making stuff up. It's some of his best writing was muscular writing, but it is a lot of it redundant, but he's not he wasn't as bad about it as a lot of other writers. I mean, most of these other writers, I'm going to show you a page here. This is the top half of one page. Okay. Look at all this. Captions and word balloons and bursts and just blah, 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 blah. And when you look at it, does it tell a story? Not really. It kind of sucks. This is the bottom half of the page, and it's a title page. This is a title page. And it's crammed with 4 panels. And the artist is doing the best he can, trying to make the page visually interesting. And the writer is doing yeoman work to cover up as much of the artwork as he can with completely redundant, completely useless, completely pointless dialogue and captions. And I will not embarrass the guy who wrote this, the creator of Black Lightning, by mentioning his name. But my whole comic career is a reaction to this kind of writing. I don't know why they did this. I mean, well, I know why they did it, because a lot of the comic writers in the 70s were all about themselves and getting their ideas across. This was fan service. They were big fanboys, and they just, were so in love with the idea that now I'm a comic book guy, I'm just going to go nuts and indulge my every comic book writing fantasy rather than actually telling an entertaining story. Or, hey, how about letting the artist tell some of the story? How about bringing in some principles of storytelling from cinema, like blocking out images and panel composition? No, these guys just, you know, they gave their artists a few paragraphs of story, and then when it came back, they just vomited, prose all over the art, just slowing everything down. So yeah, when you read this, and the problem is if you begin skipping, thought balloons and captions and the rest of it, you do lose track of the story. That's why the Demon, you don't really lose track, because Jack Kirby is a master storyteller, and he was the writer and artist, so he was carrying the weight on both ends. But a lot of times in these 70s stories, you're skipping so much that you're like, I just want to get to the letters page. I don't even know what the hell's going on in this story anymore. And the most frustrating thing is a lot of times you'll see like really talented artists, people like Frank Robbins, and who were writers as well, but they're only being the artist on the story, and they're putting in little story stuff into the panel, little subtle things in the background, that little bits of business and stuff. And generally, these newbie comic writers who were like fresh out of high school in the 70s, they ignore all that. It's like they don't even see what Frank Robbins or whoever is, or John or Lee Elias, or some of these like mega talented guys who were writers and artists, who can't resist quote unquote writing a little bit as they draw the story, and you can see what they were going for, and the guy who wrote it didn't. He just completely ignores what could have been like really cool stuff. And it's like, the artist is handing you this stuff on a silver platter. Why not take advantage of it? But yeah, yap. Come on. Take a look at some Carl Barks. He never did this. Archie Goodwin, and even Archie Goodwin was like peer pressure, indulged himself in a little bit of this in the 70s because it was kind of the house look, but he still did a better job than people like the guy that wrote this page. Ace Mowick. With all the people you've worked alongside, were there any creators who had plans for a noteworthy story they were laying out that never came to fruition? For example, if there was a subplot in Captain Potato Salad for the Human Trampoline that was leading to its own miniseries, but it was scrapped when the creator went to another publisher. Well, I've had things that fell apart when I was working with an artist, and generally it wasn't the artist's fault. Brian Stelfreeze and I were going to do, and did a lot of, a 2-issue arc on Detective Comics. And I wrote it. I wrote the whole thing, and Brian drew most of the first issue, had the second issue laid out. If you're watching this, you're seeing some of the layouts. And what the story was about, it was a story I'd always wanted to do. It was about a psychiatrist at Arkham. Some of the crazies at Arkham, the Riddler, the Joker, they're telling her about this Batman character. And at this point in the Batman mythos, he was an urban legend. That's how we were playing it. He was Bigfoot. He was, Loch Ness Monster. A lot of people didn't believe he really existed. He was tabloid trash. And but this psychiatrist begins to believe, because the manifestations, these imaginations, this delirium that these Arkham inmates are suffering from, it's consistent. All the details are consistent. And she begins to suspect that maybe, just maybe, there is a Batman. And so she goes out with one of the orderlies at night to hunt down Batman, to get a sighting. And they run across what they think is Batman, but it isn't. It's Man-Bat. And they capture him. They take Man-Bat alive, and they bring him back to Arkham Asylum to study him. And Man-Bat gets loose. And one of my favorite sequences I've ever written, and you'll never get to see it, and neither will I, is rodents or bats, creatures like that. they can collapse their skeletons. That's how, mice can fit through tiny little holes, rats can fit through tiny little holes, and bats can do the same thing, sort of collapse their skeletons and slip into like these really narrow crevices. And so Man-Bat escapes uh, from the cell they have, the inescapable cell they have him in. He easily gets out of it and begins terrorizing everyone in Arkham. And the climax of the story, um, all the villains, Ventriloquist and Riddler and Killer Croc and everybody else trapped in their cells with this monster loose amongst them. They beg and plead for Batman to come rescue them, which he does. And it was a really cool story. I think you'll think it's cool. I think it's cool. And the editor I had at the time, this is post Denny and his guys, the good guys. We're in the indifferent era of editors, the editors who thought more about scoring points at the editorial meeting than they did about how good the comics were. This editor kept interfering with the project and kept telling me that Brian wasn't handing in any pages. And I knew Brian. I mean, I could call Brian on the phone, and I knew that doesn't sound like Brian. And he said, no, I am. And he sent me proof of what he'd been doing. And this editor just didn't want to publish this 2-issue arc. And rather than say, I don't want it, he just acted like a big weenie and, passive aggressive jackass, and just sort of like let the project die, let the clock run out. And eventually I went to CrossGen and I had no more juice and we weren't getting it done. Happy ending for me anyway out of all this is Brian gave me the originals of everything he had done. So I got this big package of originals of layouts and finished pages from this 2-issue arc that will never see the light of day, unfortunately. Sad, but there's a lot of projects like that. When I was on Batman on the Outsiders, I think I got canned at issue 10, but I had written through issue 16, and I was really, if you read like Batman and the Outsiders, I was going somewhere with this story. I was laying all kinds of all kinds of groundworks about something mysterious happening on the moon and all this other stuff, leading up to a great big story with Aquaman joining the Outsiders to explore a sea of water that had been created by aliens as a sort of habitat for them on the moon, because they were like aquatic aliens. And I was really going somewhere, and they just cut me off. And then the end of the storyline, the next writer shows up and just starts a whole different thing and completely ignores everything that I had laid down. A little bit frustrating. But here's more happy news for you. A story that I thought was lost forever, an inventory issue of Law Dog, will be published. It's not lost. The artwork was lost because I'm friends with the artist, Kiki Alcatena, and he had never seen the artwork. They never returned it to him. And apparently the artwork had been gone missing, stolen from the offices and put up for auction. I talked about this in a recent video. Carl Potts alerted me. He said, have you seen this auction? An entire unpublished issue of Law Dog is up at this auction, every page. Contacted the auction house, showed them my bona fides, showed them a letter from Kiki Alcatena attesting to that what I was saying was true and that the artwork needed to be returned to me because I'm the copyright holder. And they did it. They took the auction down right away. Awesome people. And sent me the artwork. Very well packaged up and everything else. And so this will see publication, the lost issue of Law Dog. So I thought this one was gone forever. I had some really bad Xeroxes of a few of the pages. So, I mean, imagine my joy. I open this package and I get to see pages I wrote 30 years ago. And I get to see them for the first time. Most of these pages I'd never seen. And it's Alcatena, so it's, whoa! So it's gorgeous, gorgeous. So anyway, this will be out through Archaven Comics. So look for it here and other places. And we'll make it available on Amazon, print on demand. How about that? Joshua Ignatowski wins the week here. We'll see why. Do you think Ray Bradbury may have captured the world of the inner lives of children similar to how Charles Schulz did in short certain stories of his, such as The Last Circus, The Thing at the Top of the Stairs, Zero Hour, and The Million Year Picnic? Um, yeah, Bradbury. I mean, I read a lot of Bradbury when I was like 13, 14, 15, and he made me nostalgic for when I was 8. I mean, it's kind of weird. I mean, I was still a kid, and Bradbury made me think about when I was younger. And that's something. I mean, and if I read him today, the nostalgia would probably be overpowering. But you're right. Yeah, I mean, I was not that far from being a little kid, and I felt Bradbury got it right, um, more so than his many many imitators, uh, including Stephen King. That he got into the mind of a child. Something Wicked This Way Comes also is one I would add. And some of his horror stories that involve children. I would include them as well. And Schulz, I mean, let's face it, I mean, Schulz totally understood what kids were about. How when you're a little kid, you think about deep, deep issues. You think about mortality and existence. You're not articulate about it. You haven't read any Socrates or Aristotle. But if you're a thinking, sentient being and you're a child, well, maybe it's not true anymore because kids' minds are taken up with devices so much. But when I was a kid, maybe when you were a kid, you were left, long car rides or the bus ride to school or the walk to school or just idle hours. And you had a lot of time to think. You had a lot of time where you were left alone with your own mind. For me, it was math class because I never knew what was going on in math class. I was off in my own world, my own reveries. And you think about these deep issues because, when you're a kid for the first time, a pet dies, a relative dies, and it gets the mind to go and it gets the mind to wondering about, what's it all about? And the Peanuts characters delve into all of this stuff, loss and remorse and longing and all of it. And kids, think about this stuff. I think as children, we think deeper than we do as adults, quite honestly, because it's all new to us. It's a world of discovery. So I think you're onto something there, Joshua. Ray Bradbury and Charles Schulz, almost the same generation. I guess to say, yeah, they're probably roughly the same age. Uh, they knew what kids were about. They remembered their own childhoods. Twin spin. Joshua gets himself a twin spin. And he wants to know what's a story from Deadly Hands of Kung Fu that you'd say is really good for getting newcomers hooked on the series. I'd frankly say none. Stories were terrible in this magazine. the promise of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, the promise of these amazing covers, and then, the interiors, the stories were awful. They were awful. I mostly bought them for like the artwork. If Rudy Nebres was doing the art on Iron Fist or Shang-Chi, I was there. But the stories are utterly forgettable, written by people that didn't know a darn thing about martial arts. Um, I mean, these stories should have been highly cinematic, really well told. And it's a martial arts book. You can go anywhere. It could be yakuza, it could be adventure. You could make a medieval period fantasy. Because you looked at the kung fu movies. I mean, they weren't all the same. They weren't exactly cookie cutter. They would, there were some that took place during World War II and China was occupied by Japan. I mean, you could have gone anywhere, and where they went was just silly, dopey superhero stories masquerading as kung fu epics. So very very sad because I always bought the magazine, but generally just bought it to look at the art and those awesome covers. And the thing is, I would buy them. I wouldn't get them off the newsstand because pretty reliably they would show up at a used bookstore in Philly, down on Market Street. You could pick them up for 35 cents a piece. And I would just wait till they came out then. Because like I said, I wasn't reading them, and the articles were moronic, absolutely moronic. Um, it was pure exploitation, but they didn't hire anybody who knew what they were doing to write them. Triple spin. You're just racking them up today, Joshua. You are on a roll. Go to Vegas. Your odds are great. Okay. Okay, Joshua wants to know, are there any utility belt gadgets you particularly enjoyed having Batman use during your run writing him? Are there any you added to his arsenal you're particularly proud of? Yeah, I mean, I love the utility belt. As a kid, I had a utility belt. My mom took a army surplus ammunition belt and she dyed it yellow for me. But I've always wondered what to put in it. I mean, it was like I would fill like 3 pockets and the rest. I go, what else is in this thing? Um, but when I was on Batman, I was like given free reign to add gadgets, and I did. I added an element of Batman's costume where basically he had like a built-in taser, and he could, if he was knocked unconscious or whatever, and you tried to unmask him, you'd get a shock, not enough to kill you or incapacitate you, but enough that you wouldn't want to touch him again. And it was a one-time shock, although no one knew that but Batman. Robin had the same thing built into his outfit. I also put the addition of lead weights at the end of his cape, so the cape could be used as a weapon. I mean, he could flail the cape at you and knock you unconscious. Um, I had a bunch of other stuff. I think other people before me had added a bunch of stuff to the cowl, where it was a radio transmitter and things like that. Probably have a cell phone built in now into the helmet. But I generally just had lots and lots of fun, especially with the Batmobile and the other vehicles, creating other vehicles. I did a story where the Batmobile defends itself because I always wondered what happens when he parks it. I mean, why wouldn't someone try to steal this amazing ride? And showed how the Batmobile could defend itself to prevent anybody from trying to steal it. And so, tons and tons of fun. But my favorite gadget I created was like a one-time use gadget, but could be brought back today because the technology exists. In Batman 1 Million, which takes place in the far future, I had Batman equipped with datarangs. Instead of batarangs, they were datarangs. And the datarangs, he could, throw it at something, a vehicle or whatever, and not only would it stick in that vehicle and allow him to track it, it would tell him all about whatever it was stuck into. It would derive data, and so he could just throw this thing, into a server center and retrieve whatever he wanted. It was like a flying flash drive, and I was kind of proud of myself. I came up with that one. And I never used it in the regular Batman comics, but today you could because a lot of times I would run into Batman could do this, Batman could do that. The editors would go, "You can't do that. I mean, that technology's decades in the future." And I'm like, "Yeah, but wouldn't Batman have it?" Even I remember saying that Batman should have drones, and this is when nobody knew what a drone was, and I read about them that the military was experimenting with them, and I said, "Well, wouldn't Bruce Wayne have access to that kind of thing? And wouldn't it be cool if he had?" No, they didn't want to hear about it. They said that's outlandish. That could never happen. And now today, you can go over to Walmart and buy yourself a drone. Okay, Joshua's setting them up, knocking them down. Quadruple spin. Everyone wants one. Only Joshua gets one this week. Okay, Joshua says, even though you yourself are an invisible hand writer, are there moments you've found yourself really caught up and enjoying another author's poetic prose? Yeah, Cormac McCarthy. I mean, I'll read a chapter and I'll go back and reread it. Like, whoa, how did he do that? Because he is an invisible hand writer. And then when you're rereading it, you're like, oh, gosh, this language is so beautiful. This guy has got, he's got a lexicon like nobody's business. Really paints a picture with very few words. Another one, I'm reading a lot of Dorothy L. Sayers now, her Lord Peter Wimsey novels. And boy, she had a way with language. She really, master writer. She pares everything down but still, just the language is beautiful. I mean, you're better off with one beautifully written sentence than to describe something than a whole paragraph going into more detail. And you get away with it. Now, a book that had me keep stopping and rereading over and over again is an author I discovered thanks to Mike Barron. His name is Tim Willix, and my first book I read by him, and I can't wait to read more. It's a book called The Religion, and it's about the siege of Malta back during the Renaissance, when Suleiman tried to take the island of Malta with 40,000 Muslim soldiers against 500 Hospitaller knights, Crusader knights, a holy order of warriors who were holding the island of Malta. And the book is gorgeously written, just beautiful. The language in it, the dialogue, his way of describing things, just complete. I was completely enthralled. And it's one of those books that, yeah, he's not an invisible handwriter, but he's so damn good. He's so damn good. I had to keep rereading passages just to, wallow in this rich, engaging prose, and his combination of words and his daring. I mean, I hate to blow the guy up too much, but his daring use of words reminded me of like Shakespeare, because Shakespeare he had the guts of a burglar as a writer. I mean, you look at this stuff, and he'd do anything to get that point across, and to hell with proper vocabulary and proper grammar. I mean, he was creating it. He was creating grammar. He's creating the modern English language. And Willix just has that feel without being stilted, without being, la-di-da, artsy-fartsy. It's just really, really effective prose. And I urge you, if you like this, you're going to get lost in this book. You ever read a book and you never want it to end? I never wanted this book to end. If this book just went on and on for the rest of my life, I would have been happy. Just awesome stuff, and fantastic characters, and the action is like stomach churning sometimes. He really, like Cormac McCarthy, he really gets into it. He really gets into the grisly details. But awesome book. You got to pick it up. The Religion. And apparently it's part of a trilogy. Can't wait to get to the next book. Quintuple spin. I gotta confess, Joshua, I was afraid I was gonna have to create a new graphic. I have no sextuple spin graphic. I know I just threw down a gauntlet, didn't I? I just challenged you. You're gonna carpet bomb me with questions until you get a sextuple swing, or it would be a hextuple. I don't know. Please advise. Okay, Joshua is back with his last question. Just what is Graham Nolan's circular comic panel story? Graham is constantly whining and crying about the circular panel story, and I hope he's listening. When we were working on Bane Conquest, the 12-issue maxi series we did as part of a legal settlement with DC, we were working on Bane Conquest. I was writing, obviously. Graham and I like loosely plotted the thing out. He contributed a lot of ideas, and loosely plotted out. Once we agreed on the story, I started scripting, and of course, welcomed Graham's input on the scripts. And the artwork would come back, and it would have a couple of times had circular panels, like that inset circular, and it's like a close up of a character speaking. I hate them. I hate circular panels. And so I mentioned this to him. I said, "Can we ditch the I don't like the circular panels." And he said, "Well, Joe Kubert used them all the time." And I couldn't help myself. I said, "Well, you're not Joe Kubert." All I can say is he took it well. He took it well. But he loves to bring it up. And I told him that, I told him that every time I saw a circular panel from that point on, I was going to make him draw a helicopter because I knew he hated drawing them. So, so that's the circular panel story, and I'm sure you've heard Graham tell it. Any case, we're away from Joshua now, moving to Brandon Woodall. Brandon says, I recently read the Batman story Night of the Stalker and thought it was quite good, especially in how it portrays a more grounded human Batman, relying less on gadgets and more on skill and determination. It really highlights the contrast between that era and the modern portrayal of Batman as what some call super preparedness man. Some critics argue that this level of preparation strains suspension of disbelief, while others say it's necessary for Batman to plausibly stand alongside DC's heavy hitters. A counterpoint I've heard is Marvel's Hawkeye, who holds his own among superpowered heroes without being endlessly prepared for every contingency, and thus, by that logic, Batman would work the same way. What's your take on the balance? Brandon is referencing an issue of Detective Comics that happened during the awesome, like I think 10 issue run on Detective Comics when Archie Goodwin was the editor. And Archie did a series of standalone stories that every one of them is a classic. Every one. He didn't write them all. He brought in other writers. He brought in top talent, and he really made Detective Comics a treat every month, and really kind of doubling down on what Denny O'Neil had established before him. And Night of the Stalker, to me, is the best story in this bunch. And it's the simplest story imaginable. A bunch of guys pull a violent holdup in Gotham, and Batman pursues them and just will not let go. They can't escape Batman. Everywhere they go, he's there. Not through preparedness, but through sheer dogged determination. He tracks them. He hunts them down. Thus, the title Night of the Stalker. And at the end of the story, we get this like little scene of Batman, rarely seen scene of Batman, his humanity. We get to see a glimpse of Bruce Wayne at his most vulnerable, and it's just an awesome story. Steve Englehart wrote the dialogue, but Sal Amendola and his brother came up with the plot and did all of the artwork. Sal Amendola is one of those guys you never really hear a whole lot about, but he was always doing interesting work in the 70s in comics. I think he was part of Continuity Studio for a while, but just a fantastic story. And you're right. I mean, Batman doesn't have to be a one man Mission Impossible team. He doesn't have to have all the answers. Uh, he can just simply react to what's going on. I don't like super preparedness man. I don't like Bat God. I don't think Batman sees himself as in competition with all of the super beings. He knows his limitations. He knows what he can do and what he can't do. And I just prefer him as the self-made man. Yeah, he's going to prepare as much as he can, but if you have a character who's prepared all the time, it's kind of the opposite of the deconstructed plot line. I love the deconstructed plot line. I love when the hero's all ready to do one thing and something else comes at him from a crazy angle. And I don't like the preposterous Batman. I don't like when Batman is involved in anything un-Batman like. I don't really, not crazy about him mixed up with science fiction stuff. Not crazy about him mixing in with superheroes. And I certainly don't think that he sees himself in competition. Like, I got to work harder because that guy can fly. It's like, no, I've already done my hard work. I've already done everything I could to make myself the man I need to be to suit the mission. And I don't need all of this other nonsense. And how do you prepare for the Joker? In a lot of cases, he's a detective. He's solving the crime after it happened. He's not preventing the crime from happening. So yeah, I'm down with you that Batman's powers of deduction, his toughness, his resourcefulness. That's enough. That's enough. We don't need him to be perfect. We don't need him to be Mary Sue in a cape and cowl. Rex Moss. He wants to know Shrinkage is not visible on Walmart.com or BarnesandNoble.com. I found it on ThriftBooks.com, which is a used book site. What is the best way for me to buy this book? It is an Amazon exclusive, so it would not be. It is published. It is one of the few remaining books that I publish under the Bruno Books imprint. If you've ever wondered about why BrunoBookstore.com is the way to reach me. So it's only available through Amazon, and it is available in paperback and on audio and on Kindle, but only at Amazon. I'll provide a link here for any of you who want to read Shrinkage, which is it's a standalone novel about a shoplifter in 1970s in Philadelphia, and he's a low-level petty crook who just can't seem to keep out of trouble, and just makes everything worse as he tries to improve his relationship with his family and his girlfriend. And there's lots of action, lots of suspense. Dean Mullaney compared it to like a classic gold medal paperback from the 60s, and that's the highest praise I could have asked for, because that's exactly what I was aiming for. I was trying to write a gold medal paperback set in period. So there you go. Hey, one more thing. I ask you to please check out 7 Deadly Sinners. 7 Deadly Sinners is it's me and Bob C. Harden. We ride off to Tarantino Town and we never come back, in a story set again in the 1970s about a gang of outlaw bikers who come to the aid of a friend of theirs to bring $1 million in Acapulco gold to market. And all they got to do is get past an army of sheriff's deputies to get there. And the incomparable Bob C. Harden provides the artwork. Master cartoonist. Amazing stuff. I guarantee you'll be entertained. And it is from Ripasend. I will, again, provide the links below. And I just wanted to give you a little glimpse of Bob's magic, this 120-page graphic novel. That is 7 Deadly Sinners from Ripasend. And the campaign's still going, and I would appreciate your patronage. The aforementioned Bruno Bookstore at gmail.com, Bruno Bookstore at gmail.com is the best way to reach me with your amazing questions. Joshua will be, I hope there's room on my email after Joshua gets done bombing me with enough questions to get a sextuple spin. Ooh, that sounds nasty. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for just watching. Thank you for the incredible questions, suggestions, all the rest. And I'll see you all down the road.